More evidence they've been lying about retirement for decades. Decades. So I'm reading my book, History of Retirement by William Graebner, The Meaning and Function of an American Institution, 1885 to 1978. And you can just see it's just chock full of footnotes. And you can see, like, I highlighted that one right there. That's from a guy named M.B. Folsom, Coordination of Pension Plans to Social Security. I couldn't find that article. It was written in 1939 to 1940. I couldn't find it. Let me take this off. Sorry about my hair. Just because a lot of these things are older. So this book was written published in 1980, but it was written in 1978. But anyway, and then I just got all kinds of other like footnotes. I'm trying to find. I can't find a lot of them, but I did find this one. All right, so this is from George Hurff, H-U-R-F-F. Our Older People, New Markets for Industry, the Journal of Business, April 1954. And this is what we're going to refer to here today, about even more proof that they're lying about retirement. Who are they? Well, the peons in the retirement planning industry, the people pushing the nightmare, like, oh, no, I'm going to retire. And the Centers for Retirement Research at Boston College, the New School over there, just tons of people just lying about it. And these are academics, and they have to know, because if you actually look at a book like this, there's so much data sets going back to 1920, 30, 40, 50, and whatnot. You're like, how can someone today sit there and say retirement is a unicorn when we know for a fact it's just not, and it has never been? And I'm going to share with you right now. How can any academic say this? Well, they're saying it because they're getting paid by the bad people. They're getting paid by bad organizations, bad people with bad intentions. Why? Because the bad people want to keep Americans in fear. Fear is how you manage people, man. It's just all there is to it. Fear is how you control people. No other way around it, man. And as such, if they can get people in fear, like, oh my goodness, you can't retire. You got to stay at your crappy old job, miserable. That's just a fact. So you got the bad people up here. I don't know who they are. George Soros. I don't think. I mean, he's. I think he's a minion in the overall. I think there's people well above him who control everything. But George Soros, Bill Gates, these guys are clowns. I mean, they're certainly head and shoulders above in terms of the ranking order of the bad people than the peons that is negative retirement naysayers. But I mean, they're just doing their bidding nonetheless because they get paid, man. It's just fact. So anyway, let's go over here. So basically, my man George, who's a professor of economics at the University of Florida, he says he can start his article, light on the spending behavior of retired people is especially wanting, as was made evidence in the course of this paper. Concerning the retired and whose spending behavior there should be considerable market interest, because he's writing a paper for the Journal of Business, how to market to these people to sell products. And he's saying we don't have enough data on this, so who these people are, what they're spending. Concerning the behavior of the retired, it must be noticed that census and other data do not readily permit the clear demarcation of this group. And so what he does, I'm not going to go into it, but he kind of defines just basically the over 65 population, essentially. And of interest, the over 65 population, 40% were still working. 40%, isn't that interesting? It's like, oh, 65, we all had pensions, we all could retire back to the 1950s. Not according to George in 1954. 40% were still working. Isn't that crazy? Oh boy, Bob wants to come on. You're trying. Oh, now we're running away. All right. So now he's going to go. A factor of central importance in the market view of any group is their distribution of income. All right. So in table, and so what he's going to show here in his table 1, and you're going to see income of families and families with heads 55 years of age and over 1950. So we had 39 million, all families, and the highest income was $3,099, so $3,000 to $4,000. Then you go 55 to 64, their highest income was $2,000, $3,000. Then you go 65 and older. There's almost 5 million people there, or households. Their income was 30%. 30% of their highest income was under $1,000, and that's in 1950. All right, so you're like, see, it just proves though these guys run out of money. Look, they can't retire. Look at that, because their income went from $4,000 to $2,000 to $3,000 to less than $1,000. Interesting. But now we're going to say what income is. So we're going to look at this down here, and this is what freaking, pardon my French, pisses me off. How the academics just don't get this. Income, as defined here, excludes money receipts from the following sources: withdrawals from bank accounts, withdrawals from bank accounts, gifts, lump sum inheritance, insurance payments, and income derived from the sale of assets. I worked with a guy, sold his business in Tejas. Couple million bonus he sold it for, sitting in cash, 5% roughly. He's getting $100,000 a year from his interest now. He doesn't need to take any market risk. Now this is in 1950, I grant you, but that $100,000 a year would not show up in this right here. Oops. Why? Because income excludes money receipts from withdrawals from bank accounts or the sale of assets. It also excludes income in kind, such as the value of homegrown food, free housing, or contributions of food and housing, transfer payments. So with that caveat in mind, let's turn to Table 1. It's clear that families with an aged head have predominantly low incomes. If the family head is still working, his earnings have shrunk. If retired, his retirement income tends to be low. In fact, half of the families with a head over 65, had income below $2,000. In fact, 3 out of every 10 had income below $1,000. They must be impoverished. They're running out of money. They're eating dog food. But again, income right there. Withdrawals from bank accounts and sale of assets. Interesting. Let's keep going. The median income of a family headed by a person 65 and older was $1,900. All right, so we see here the median income is $1,900, but headed by a household 65 or older. It has been estimated, so that's the median income. The median income is much higher. It's gonna be hard. I don't have my pencil. Let me see right here. The median income is $1,900. It's right there. All right, which is pretty interesting. But check this out. It has been estimated that a modest level of living for a retired elderly couple costs between $1,700 and $1,800 a year. And the median income for a family headed by a person 65 is $1,900, and that does include employees. Because remember, we already talked, 40% of that population is still working. So it's been estimated that a modest level of living for a retired couple over 65 is basically right at the median income that a family of 65 has. All right. So you have to say, well, what consists of a modest level of income? Ready? And the BLS, that's the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and their monthly labor review from 1951 defines a modest level of income, a modest level of standard of living. Husband and wife, approximately 65 years of age, who maintains his own 2 or 3 rented dwelling, 2 or 3 room rented dwelling. Again, a retired husband and wife who maintains their own 2 to 3 room rented dwelling, not 2 to 3 bedrooms, not 2 to 3 bathrooms, 2 to 3 room rented. I'm highlighting rented. It's important to understand. Let's see. The elderly couple's budget was designed to provide a level of living which includes goods and services necessary for a healthful, self-respecting mode of living that allows normal participation in the life of the community. Social and conventional as well as physical, psychological needs are taken into account. The budget applies to elderly couples who are able to get about and take care of themselves, with the husband retired or only having only occasional employment. The family owns no automobile. So again, this is the typical modest level of living is a couple, 65 or older, who has a 2 to 3 room home that's rented and they own no automobile. The level of living defined by the elderly couple is similar to that of city workers' family budget for 4 persons. All right. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimated the cost for the 4-person family budget in October of 1950 ranges from $3,500 in New Orleans to $4,000 in Milwaukee. So basically, you have a family of 4. Jane, Joe, Joni, and Joey. You know what I'm saying? Joni and Joey are the kids. That they need about $3,500 to live a modest level of life in New Orleans. Again, 2 to 3 rooms with no car, and $4,000 in Milwaukee. And then when Joey and Joni are out, they don't need that much. They need about $1,800. Let's keep checking out. The cost of comparable housing was a chief item causing variation in the elderly's couple budget. The average yearly rent of a 2 to 3 room dwelling, all right, the average yearly rent of that 2 to 3 room dwelling, plus the cost of heat and utilities range from $436 in New Orleans to $700 in Milwaukee. All right, so again, if you're in Milwaukee, you need about $1,800 to live a modest lifestyle, of which $700 of that is going to go to rent. All right, I'm going to tie this, so hang in there, I'm going to tie this with a bow. The combined cost of food, house furnishings, and all other items range from $1,100 to Savannah to $1,269 in Seattle. So again, we're showing you need about $1,000 outside of rent to live on. And again, these guys had no car. All right, $1,000 a year to live a modest lifestyle in a 2 to 3 room house. All right. Since a large part of the income of such a couple is typically derived from pensions, annuities, or old age assistance, their buying power has probably diminished, although not necessarily due to the full extent of the 8.3% increase in consumer prices. So they were worried about inflation back then too. All these fools, like, inflation is no big deal. Yes, it was. Yes, it was, even back then. Oh my goodness, and we were still had the gold window. Bretton Woods had not come around. It is generally accepted that consumer spending behavior is heavily influenced by the amount of income, the standard of living, expectations concerning the future, and the prices and the elasticity of demand for different kinds of commodities. Income clearly sets an upper limit to spending unless debt or dissaving is incurred. What is dissaving? Withdrawal from your bank accounts, selling your assets, capital gain. So what people were spending on? Here's what they were spending on. Reported for 1950, 51, and 1949, 50, 51. From the Federal Reserve Bulletin, August 1952. Table 2 for durable goods. Durable goods. This category deals with the purchases of new automobiles, used automobiles, furniture, and major household appliances. Now remember, our modest level of spending had no automobiles. And we're going to sit right here. And each year, our class, those aged 65 and older, had a smaller percentage of its group buying these items than was the case for any other group except 18 to 24. Non-farm home ownership, so home ownership. And each year, 65% of this group own their own homes. This group being those over 65. And each year, 65% of our group over 65 owned their own homes. So why are we saying we need a modest level of income when almost a half of our income needs goes to rent, when 65% of this category owns their own homes? Why would we? It's the same thing with CPI and OER and rent. It's so friggin' stupid. Again, modest level of income includes renting a 2 to 3 room home, renting. And yet 65% of people over 65 own their own homes. Home purchases. A smaller percentage of our group, 65 and older, made purchases of non-farm homes in each year than was the case for any other class except 20 to 24 group, 18 to 24 group. Why? Because they already own their own homes. They're not trying to move. They own their own homes. They bought their house in Florida, they bought their house in Massachusetts, where the hell they bought it. 65% own their own homes. They're not trying to move. So there's very few people buying a car, very few people buying a house. Because they're, what? Content where they are? Savings. This is actually money that you save. Our subject age group, 65 and older, had a substantially smaller fraction of savings from current income than did any other class. Oh my, see, Josh, they're not saving any money. They must be running out because they're not saving. Of those dissavings, depletion of assets, as much as 25% or more of income, this group had the largest percentage. So the over 65 people were not only not saving because most of them weren't working, but they're spending down their savings. 25% or more of their income came from spending down their own savings. And what's not considered an income? Spending down your savings. Assets. All right. Those 65 and older showed a greater percentage holding assets amounting to $25,000 or more than did any other group. The proportion holding assets between 1 and 5,000 was smaller in the over 65 group than any other group. 5,000 to 25,000, it was smaller than for the age group 45 to 64. However, the age 65 and older showed a greater percentage holding assets over 25 than any other group. Debt. So you think, well, if they don't have enough assets and they're spending down their savings, they must be taking on debt. Debt. A much larger proportion of this age group reported no debt than did any other class. So they own their own homes, they're spending down their income, their assets, and they're not taking on debt. And they have more money than anyone else, even in the 1950s. How they're not taking on debt? The average age of those 65 and older reporting, reporting for the 3 years was about 75. The average of those age right here, 75% were reporting no debt. A much larger proportion of this age group reported no debt than did any other class. The average for those age 65 and older reporting for those 3 years, 49, 50, 51, was 75% had no debt. Mortgage. Of the subject age group, 80% of those ownings and occupying their homes had no mortgage. No other group has so large a fraction reporting their homes clear of mortgage debt. Non-real estate debt. The subject age group had 80% reporting no such debt. This was a greater fraction so reporting than was the case for any other age group. About 2/3 of those aged 65 and over who did report some debts had debts between $100 and $200. $1 and $200. $1 to $200. Net worth. The position of the elderly group was similar to that shown for net assets, in that the proportion with net worth in the 1 to 5,000 was smaller than for any other age group. 5,000 to 25,000 was smaller than for the age group 45 to 64, and it showed greater percentage with net worth over 25,000 than any other age group. Broadly stated, these surveys show that persons 65 and older save a smaller proportion of their income than those do in the early and middle adult years. Yet in their total indebtedness, including mortgage debt, tends to be smaller, while net worth is typically greater. The proportion of this age group owning their homes was very much greater than for any other age group. However, as purchasers of durable goods, they figured less importantly than any other age group because they're content with their fridge, they're content with everything they got, their car, they're content with their freaking blender. I mean, although we have seen that their incomes are preponderantly, or very, I don't know what that word is, low, very low, according to the current projections of the Bureau of the Census, the oldsters will number 14 million in 1955, 19 million in 1970. Industry, therefore, cannot afford to ignore this market of a growing segment of our population because they obviously have the disposable income, even though it shows that they're poor. How does academia miss this? It's literally insane to me. It frustrates me to no end because the numbers are there. You cannot simultaneously be running out of money and not take on debt. You can't, or you have no money and not take on debt. Those things are mutually exclusive. One can't happen, it can't exist with the other. You just can't while you're working. So you got no income coming. We have little income, but we're not adding to our debt. Well, the little income is derived by not including withdrawals from savings and selling of capital assets. So how is this happening? I'll let you figure it out. Anyway, such a great book. I'm going to probably do an email about this book here today because it's great. I love it. I love the footnotes. I love all that stuff. It's fun to research and it's fun to share with you my findings, man. You've been lied to for decades about retirement. Just prove it right here. Yeah. Love your thoughts. We'll see you